everyone, and welcome to another review by ThinkerThemer. I'm Amy, I'm all about the mechanics. This is my partner Maggie, who's all about the theme, and together we review games from these two different perspectives. Today we are excited to review the much hyped Ark Nova, which is the debut title for Matthias Wigger. So we are going to talk through what this game is all about, how it plays, and what we think about it.
Yeah, so in Ark Nova, we are all zoo owners, and we're going to be designing and seeing our zoo flourish and being very mindful to balance both the zoo appeal so that we can actually have, people coming and visiting and learning from all of our animals, but also investing in conservation projects to make sure that everything is sort of done sustainably and that, we're actually doing good things for the wildlife and for the environment.
Now, what's so special about the mechanics of Ark Nova? It all centers around the action selection system by way of the 5 cards in front of you in your personal zoo area, because these 5 cards show you the 5 possible actions that you can take in the game, and this creates an action queue. And the order in which these cards are shown in front of you dictates the strength of the power. So if I was to take the build action in this 4 spot, it has essentially a power of 4, and then that moves down to the bottom of that queue. And now if I wanted to build again, it has a much lower value, whereas everything else shifts up. Now, as Maggie mentioned, the main things that you're trying to get done in this game is to be a great zoo manager and have good conservation points and partnerships with other zoos around the world. And the other is to have a very appealing zoo and to make sure that people are coming in and buying tickets to your zoo to, of course, make money to look after all these animals. And these 2 things are represented by the 2 tracks around the board. Running counterclockwise is the appeal, which has a lot of small steps, and running clockwise is these green steps, which represents your conservation points. And so both of your markers are going in opposite directions, and the game end is triggered when any one person has their 2 markers cross over. Now, the way that you're going to be increasing the appeal of your zoo is to be bringing in lots of different animals from different parts of the world, and you're going to be doing that by way of the cards in your hand that have animals on them, as well as drafting them from this central area and from the main deck. And the way this works is the cards, the animals themselves, get played into a tableau area, and they give your zoo both appeal, and you're going to get some unique action that you can do as a result of playing that card. They also have region symbols and animal family symbols on them, which act as a bit of a engine building element, because you need those to be able to get other things done and play other cards, because some will require that you have those symbols already in your zoo. But you can't play animals down into your tableau until you have enclosures built on your little tile placement game, which is your zoo in front of you, your player board. And first you need to build an enclosure. So this one that I just played, the little raccoon, actually needed me to have an enclosure of at least size 1, which I may have built earlier in my zoo. And then to signal that that raccoon is now in there, I would turn over this enclosure, and now it's filled and no other animal can fit in there. It also cost me money to put this animal in my zoo, $11, which I would take from my central pool of money. So you can see that as you collect more and more animals, you're going to have more and more enclosures in your zoo, which means there's a few different things that you need to be able to get done. And on top of all of that, you need to be able to balance your money. Now, the game continues with every person taking one action and moving the card and shifting all of their cards up. And there are some actions that will move this break track. And as soon as the break track hits this threshold, basically we're going to do an income round, where then you'll be able to get more money based on where you are on the appeal track, as well as any other ongoing bonuses that you've built out in your tableau. The main way to get conservation points in this game is really to go for these group objectives that are set at the start of the game, or objective cards that have been added by all of the players, and they're going to require you to have certain sets or combinations of symbols here in your tableau or in your zoo already built. The final piece of the puzzle that I want to talk about before we get into our full review, where we'll talk more about some of the detail and nuance, is that these action cards can be upgraded throughout your game. However, it's unlikely that you're going to be able to upgrade all of them. When you turn over these cards, they're going to upgrade the action to not only give you a stronger action in that particular area, but also unlock parts of the game that are locked up until that point where you can turn over and upgrade that action. And so you have to really think carefully about what type of strategy you're pursuing and therefore the cards that you need to upgrade. There's very few additional points that are added at the end of the game. You will have at least one end game condition, which will give you a few points, as well as some of the cards have end game scoring on them as well to do with different things that you've got done in your zoo. And so those are really only the extra points, but really it is about improving as much as possible your score on those 2 tracks by the end of the game. So now for some of the finer details, we'll talk about what we thought of Ark Nova. Now I have to say, this game has rocketed up so many people's top games of all time.
Yeah.
Like Tom Vassell, I believe, who played this game and it rocketed straight up to his #1 game of all time. That is like high praise for this game.
Yeah.
And we have played this game a lot at all different player counts and feel very comfortable talking about some of the nuances and things we did like and didn't like about the game. Can we start with the action selection? Because I just spoke about it.
Yeah, okay.
This is really clever.
Yeah, I really enjoy that. The tension between, oh, you know, I really need to use this, but it's not powerful enough yet. And then if I do use it, it's going to be very, very weak for quite some time. Even though there are ways of boosting them. So there's these little X or cross markers that you can get that essentially act as a add 1 to whatever level your action is. But there is a limit to how many of those you can have at any given time, and they're not that easy to come by. You can sort of get them through blocking. That's the other thing when you're building your zoo. As you're building those enclosures, the things that you're covering are going to give you additional bonuses and additional goodies and things that you can use.
There's lots of nuances in what you get and, you know, the way that you can get things done in this game. But this central mechanic of selecting your own action from your own action cards is really quite cool because you do need to think ahead. You do need to think, actually, I want to build an animal into my tableau. If it's at a 2 location, I can build one animal. If it's at build one animal. I can put an animal in an enclosure.
Play an animal card.
If it's on the 5 location, I can play 2 animal cards at once. So I'm better off waiting until, or am I? Because there might be an action I want to play. But, you know, to be more efficient, it's better to play 2 animals at once. And so you're constantly thinking about how these cards are going to shift and move around and move up the action queue.
I also enjoy that tension of, you know, there are the times to upgrade your card, so flip it over, are few and far between, and you are not going to be able to upgrade all of them usually. So the tension of which one do I start, because they all are so powerful when you flip them over. They're just like, oh, you could see the benefits of going, oh, I really want to upgrade that one. Oh, but if I upgrade that other one, it's going to really help me. And so that actually has been an interesting thing over different games, playing with the order in which I upgrade and see, well, you know, which is going to give me a better like early game advantage versus,
And we didn't mention, but at the start of the game, you draft your first 4 cards, and your starting cards are really pivotal in driving what your strategy is going to be. If you happen to get, you know, all cards that need science symbols or all cards that are from one region and that relates to one of the group objectives, then it's got you thinking about, well, which actions are going to be more important to me early in the game. And so you can really plan out your strategy that way, which I really appreciate. And one thing that we didn't talk about as well is this board that's kind of floating off to the side here. This is actually related to one of these actions, which is called association. When you take the association action, you use this meeple figure and move them out onto the board over here, kind of like a worker placement, depending on what power your card is at, dictates where you can go here. And if you pick up these regions, it's like you're making a partnership with this area. So this would be Australia here, or Oceania, or Australasia, if you will. And it goes here onto your board. And now it's a $3 discount for every card that you play that has that region on it. And so that is another part of that engine building. If you've got a lot of one region in your cards, then you might want to think about purchasing that or getting that so that you can have a discount. There's also these other little university tokens that you can move onto your board as well, and they're going to allow you to have more science symbols, which helps with your tableau, or they also can increase your hand limit size, because every time we go through this break we're going to have to reduce down to our hand limit. So there's a lot of different things that are going on to help you achieve your objectives, and you need to think about the order in which to do those.
Yeah, I like with those ones as well. It's like there's this sort of tension of, which one do I focus on? Because the more of one of those that you get, you see that you can start unlocking different additional bonuses. So for example, one of them, whenever you see that symbol, that's the upgrade a card. But then to go above that, you actually are going to need to have the association card already upgraded before you're even allowed to go there. This can be also very powerful. Things like allowing you to release another one of your little meeple workers or for the associations, because it means that then within one round or one turn, you're going to be able to potentially do multiple actions on that board as well.
Now let's talk about the zoo. So there is this element of tile placement, and as Maggie mentioned, you are going to be able to unlock bonuses if you cover those spaces with tiles, and the tiles being mostly the different enclosures. It's really interesting because the enclosures are quite expensive to build, and some animals require like a 5 enclosure. So you need to think about the way that you place these tiles, and also they can generate income for you if you have a kiosk tile that is adjacent to some filled enclosures. You're going to get additional money every income. So this puzzle itself is really interesting. The most interesting thing about it, I think, is that if you can cover every space excluding the water and the mountains, you're going to get 7 appeal, which is quite a big boost in appeal. And so there is this element of, can I cover this whole thing as well by the end of the game, which I really like. There's also this really interesting academic research track in the center here, and basically this is going to give you bonuses along it, but also it's going to tell you where you can draft from. So you can only draft as far as you have moved on this track, generally speaking, and so it's important for you to be able to unlock different cards. Let's talk about the cards, because that is one thing that has driven you a little crazy in this game.
Look, there's a lot of cards, which is great because it means that there's a lot of variability. Not just the cards, like the maps, there's a lot of different maps, and you can evolve. This is the beginner map, but then you can evolve into like even almost asymmetric powers or abilities types things. So there's a lot of replayability, and because of the stack of cards, there's also a lot of replayability there. The problem with a huge stack of cards is this is a game that is highly dependent on the cards that you're getting and making the best use out of those cards. It's been compared to Terraforming Mars in that sense of, again, like there's all of those, the symbol, symbiosis, making sure that you get those good connections between those symbols, get them working the best. But as opposed to Terraforming Mars, in here, that's essentially where all of your actions and points and things are going to come from, is from those cards. In games like Terraforming Mars, you do have ways of overriding. If you're not getting the cards that you need, or the card that you've been waiting for, there's ways of overriding and still taking those big actions and kind of moving the dial along without, and potentially even like ignoring the cards. Here, I found myself several times so frustrated because, particularly in the lower player counts, if the market is not getting refreshed all that much, and the stack of cards is so big that even if I'm drafting cards at the highest possible level, where I'm getting 3 cards and only putting 1 back, or even when I upgrade it and I get to draft 4 cards, sometimes that deck is so big that the cards that you need may not be until the very, very end. And so it becomes really frustrating because you kind of feel like you're tied, your hands are tied, and you're not able to kind of get the momentum that you need.
I noticed that in this game, that I wish the market was kind of refreshed a bit more often, because what happens in any time that there's a break and we're kind of going through the interim scoring, these 2 cards get discarded, all the other cards come up, and 2 more cards get added. It's not that much of a refresh, and in a lower player count game, you don't get to see as many cards. But I'm a little bit more forgiving of having a little bit of luck in a game. I do like the tactical element of trying to make the best of what I have. So I do appreciate that sometimes you just get a really bad hand of cards, and that has happened to me in this game, and it's hard to come back from without having a very clear synergy of cards. But you know, sometimes I feel like I can get a little bit of what I want to get done and then I don't really have the right card. So it forces me to look at something else to get points and then come back to that when the card does come out. So I don't mind being a little bit more flexible, whereas I know that you like to play out a total strategy.
Yeah, it's one of those games where it's really hard to go into it going, I'm going to do this one strategy and I'm just going to say, like, you can, but you may really shoot yourself in the foot if those cards are not on your favor.
Yeah.
Like, and same with the conservation cards or those conservation projects. Out of the two tracks, the conservation track is by far the hardest one to move along. That's usually going to be the slowest one. And for that reason, you can actually get some really, really nice benefits as you're going past some of this, even the earlier kind of milestones, which is trying to encourage you to do this, potentially earlier on in the game.
But because at the beginning of the game, there are 3 major ways to get conservation points through these 3 cards and their goals, that can be really difficult as well. In my last game, I just happened to have no cards in my hand that related to those. And so I knew that was going to be a real problem for me moving forward. And so I had to focus on something else. So yes, it is very dependent on your cards. Yes, there are people house ruling that the market gets redrafted more drastically, but we can only review it for the way that it's designed. And that is a little bit of a problem that will probably annoy some people. I think that what is really satisfying about the cards though is the tableau building and the engine building element. And that's what people love about Terraforming Mars. It's the hand management of looking at all the cards in your hand, thinking about the order in which you play them in order to be able to build that next thing, and and maybe have to go out and get something else before I can build something else. And then you've got in this game this action selection component, which is really super interesting, and I like the way that all really comes together. And the choices that you have to make are really like palpable. It's annoying because you've got to get something done before you can get something else done, that classic Euro style gaming, which I really enjoy. For me, this game is not at all interactive enough. So for my taste, this game is and I feel this way about Terraforming Mars in that it's quite multiplayer solitaire. In this game, even the action selection mechanism is built into your player board. Everyone's kind of head down. I found that when I'm playing my turn, no one else really cares because they're all looking at their puzzle, thinking about
nightmare.
Yeah, thinking about what they're going to do next. And I don't really have any incentive to watch what other people are doing aside from hoping that they don't take a card that I want to draft next. And so if you like high interaction, then this game might not be for you. But having said that, I do enjoy it enough that if someone wants to play this game, then I'm happy to sit down because the puzzle is fun. It's hard. There's a lot of like tension in the puzzle and the choices that you have to make. And I really enjoy hand management. So that card element is quite fun for me. It's just not going to be in my top 10 games because it's so multiplayer solitaire, which you happen to love.
Well, see, that's the other thing. Like on paper, this should be the ideal, Maggie themer game. It is actually really thematic. It's a theme that I enjoy. The cards, the way that the actions work in the individual cards when you play them makes sense as you tie them to the individual sponsors or to the individual animals. So everything should kind of come together, but I just can't, I find it very difficult to get past some of those games where I do end up getting a bit frustrated that the set of cards that are coming up is not what I need, but also that there's no way for me to override that, which in Terraforming Mars, even though yes, it is multiplayer solitaire and all of that stuff, I could play a game without you wouldn't be advised to, but you could play the game almost without the cards, like just building up your mega credits and then just using money essentially to move all of your levers across. You can always take those actions without you being so tied to the cards. Obviously, you want to use the cards to optimize everything, but yeah. So I think in this one, the other thing was like with the money. The money can be very very tight and different. It's one of those swinging games because sometimes the money is so tight and you're just scrambling for like a couple of coin here and there, and then sometimes you just you've got this tower
Flush
of money,
with cash, and you get lots of stuff done.
Yeah, but sometimes you end up with this tower of money that then it's actually worth nothing at the end of the game.
Yeah. Speaking of the money, it's the one component that I just wish they put more effort into. I really dislike the money. It's very functional, but it's just like a number on a thing.
On a grey square.
Probably I'll just use some generic coins when we play this, but yeah, that is a bit ugly. But the rest of the components are really quite nice. I actually like the photographic style of the
that
cards.
is quite nice,
Yeah, I didn't think I would when I was looking at pictures of it, but in person it's actually much nicer. And it's really nice to have that link between region and the actual animals of that region. I really enjoy reading through the cards when we're playing, so I really like that. It feels like, ooh, I'm adding this exotic animal, which adds a lot of appeal, because of course it would, because it's this like really cool animal in my zoo.
So I'll talk about the solo, because I actually have played this solo as well. And again, it was one of those things that when I learned about the solo mode, I was like, oh, thank goodness, because it's exactly the type of solo that I like. No convoluted AI to have to facilitate. It's essentially just this one little tracker that you put cubes of a different kind of player color on it. And then as you're taking turns, those cubes are just moving to the right, and they act as a timer. So as soon as you reach the final one, that triggers a break, and then the top cube moves to starts blocking your association, your bonus action of being able to buy those conservation points one at a time. So once you've gone through that, a few times, then the game ends. It's an interesting one because again, it felt a lot, well, obviously faster, but a lot more pressure than when you're playing with other players. Because when you're playing with other players, I don't know, it just always takes longer. It's not as, come on. Like, because everyone's kind of, figuring out what to do with their two tracks.
It's a fairly AP prone game as well, because there's so many interlocking things, and then all your cards in your hand, it can be AP prone. Yeah.
But as a solo experience, it's very, very good. Great. Like, you get to experience the exact same game, essentially, because it is, it can be such a multiplayer solitaire. Very cleverly what they've done with some of the cards that do have an interactive element, they've added another little note underneath. So if you're playing solo, you just use that section instead.
Talking about player count, my preferred player count of this game is actually 2. I find because it's so multiplayer solitaire anyway, I would maybe think about house ruling the market at 2, but a 2-player game is only 90 minutes when we play. We time ourselves, and it was like bang on 90 minutes with 2 players, and it just feels a lot snappier because there's not as much downtime, because it is multiplayer solitaire. The more players you add, the more downtime it feels like you're experiencing, and so it was just a much smoother game and more interesting to play, I thought, at 2 players. So if you are looking for a really meaty experience for 2 players that has that real Euro feel, definitely check out this game for a 2-player count.
Or solo.
Yeah. The one thing as well that I wanted to talk about is just the way that scoring happens at the end. When your 2 markers or someone's 2 markers cross over each other, you're then all going to take your one score and minus it from the other, which means that a score of 0 is actually really good. And the range of scores is like from, minus 20 to plus 20-ish. And so that is a really interesting...
Or minus 54 in my case.
Or minus 54.
I've gotten better. I've gotten a lot better. Yeah.
But, a score of 0 is quite a strange thing to think about
to aim for as a good thing.
As a trying to get those things to neutral. So it's a really interesting way to score at the end. It does mean that at the end, because it ends when someone goes past themselves, that you should save a really big move for last so that you can push past that point as much as possible if you're going to be the person making the crossover. But anyway, that is just a really interesting element of the game. Overall, I think this game will stay in our collection. I feel as though we both enjoyed enough, and the friends we've introduced this to have really enjoyed this game. So much so that they've contacted me later and been like, can we come back around and play another game of that zoo game? And I like the games that have that, that interesting kind of, that feeling that sparks something in people. And I can see why so many people love this game. For me, I enjoy this game.
I'm the same.
Not my favorite.
I'm the same,
But I really appreciate what they've done mechanically. Particularly with the action selection system. I hope to see more of that in future games, and very excited for what this designer has in store for us next. If you enjoyed this review, please hit like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and we'll be back with more board game reviews soon. But otherwise, bye for now.
Bye.